I'm going to miss the challenges. I've always been a challenge-oriented person, and I'm going to certainly miss that. But my wife has got a list of challenges for me to complete now, so I'm sure I'll be busy, but busy doing something else. It caused me to really think about, you know, when I got into the business at 22 and where we're at today. So, you know, certainly the community's expectations have changed, right? The other thing that's really changed is when I got into law enforcement, we did everything with a pen and a piece of paper, and that's not the case today. You know, I was a SWAT commander when Columbine happened, and that is one particular, you know, call, one particular incident that really resonated with me through the remainder of my career. What officers do on a day-to-day basis, you know, has an impact on them. You know, they sometimes get the opportunity to do really good things and help people, and that's very rewarding. And I've had the opportunity to meet cops throughout the United States. They're really good people, and they're really committed to service, right? And they have a really difficult job. 99% of the cops out there are committed to providing service and making a community safer, and I'm going to miss them.